Hello, Jeando.
Hello, Kevin.
In the last video, we were talking about learning to do, which we've been doing a long series on, and specifically the means whereby of learning to do something new. And one of the last things you were talking about is what is a reasoned act and how that relates to learning to do. So, can you talk about a little bit more about that, please?
Yes, certainly. So I think it's so sometimes I show you some uh, writings by Alexander, and I'm not saying that I'm exploring all of it. So this time I'm going to take one older picture that a text we've already seen. But I had some conversation with teachers this week, and I think sometimes it's necessary to explore further, and sometimes it's not the idea of going into the little details of conscious guidance, but just the broad facts, because when you've been through the modern Alexander technique training schools, you tend to be really focused. I'm thinking brainwashed into thinking that the feeling sense, what your teachers are doing is that they are giving meaning to the correct acts, meaning to the instructions we are using with their hands, and manipulating you, and that is the only way to get an understanding of what it is. So of course, conscious guidance is totally different. There is no hands-on in the way I teach. And so I think it's necessary to come back to this idea of learning to do that Alexander started to promote really at the end of his life. Well, you hear a lot about learning to do in conscious guide in the Constant Universal in Living, which is the last book of Alexander and not in the first one. But I'm going back to a text from The Use of the Self right now. This is it. We've already seen it. So Alexander is making fun of us, I think. He's saying that if we are to understand the means whereby principle, when you start a sentence by if we are to understand, you suggest that people are not understanding, or that the reader is not really understanding what it is you are proposing, because there is a future that is involved in if we are to understand, or the conditions for understanding the means whereby principle. And it's a means whereby principle on which the teacher who adheres to the idea of unity in the working of the human organism will base his teaching method. So I think this is a sort of sentence that I follow in my own work. We must recognize that the attainment of any desired end, or the performance of any act, such as the making of a golf stroke, involves the direction and performance of a connected series of preliminary acts by means of the mechanism of the organism. And that therefore, if the use of the mechanisms is to be directed so as to result in the satisfactory attainment of the desired end, the direction for this use must be projected in a connected series to correspond with the connected series of preliminary acts. It's quite a mouthful, certainly, but there are things that I must explain, or I must explain my way of understanding this mouthful, this complex sentence. The first part is I'm going to try and describe how I understand the performance of any act. So in the perspective of the means whereby principle, we believe that any act involves the direction and performance of a connected series of preliminary acts. So I translate these preliminary acts as essential movements of the parts of the mechanism of the torso. And so what is the direction and performance of a connected series of preliminary acts. I thought that the best way was to see what is happening when you're having a lesson or a session of conscious guidance and control with me. So I've taken an image out of a video of a lesson, yes, and we see at the moment that there is one teacher that is requested to sit, but it's difficult to see maybe, but she's holding something. There is a very long wooden ruler under her right armpit, and she's holding the ruler with the left hand in a certain way, and with the right one, the right hand in another way. Yeah, she has received instructions as to what grip should be set on the ruler. I have given her instructions, and she's expected to act in accordance with the new instructions. Of course, when we are talking of the preliminary acts, these are not the acts that we call preliminary. The acts of folding the ruler in a certain way under the armpit are not part of the preliminary acts, but they are associated with it. What it means is that the pupil is asked to think of a connected series of acts. Yes, the pupil is asked to link up the movement of the arms with the movements of the parts of the torso. And during the session, you can see that she is more or less succeeding. First of all, because she was requested to go into monkey and then sit. This is after monkey and going to sit. And monkey is the flexion, and the flexion of the knees and hips. And going to sit is to flex the hips, knees, and ankle. When she's what I call in monkey inflection, her back of their knees are still on the chair, still touching the front of the chair. So we are certain that the ankles are not flexed. After that, she's requested, of course, to continue to carry the ruler horizontally. And while the torso is moving in space, the only way to get the ruler to be set horizontal that the pupil has discovered at her own expense is that she must constantly direct the movement of the elbows and shoulders to continue a movement so that the ruler does not fall down at the front. And so it is obvious here that there is a connected series of preliminary acts. This direction of the connected series of preliminary acts is, of course, mental. She must have all the acts in memory so that she can follow the different rules which are connecting the acts together. So she's requested to move the hands, the elbow and shoulders to make the ruler horizontal, while directing the movements of the different parts of the torso in relation with the movement of the hips, knees, and ankle. That means that the geometry of the back that we see, the fact that the head is projected forward and up, is the result of her acting in accordance with new instructions. You must understand that when this session is occurring, the person is thousands of kilometers away from me, and the only way that she can act in accordance with the new instruction is through verbal speech. I can only tell stories. I cannot touch her. She's her own master. She must direct the movement herself, and she must learn to act in accordance with a long series of instructions. This is not something that she's been taught in her training course. She's a pure beginner in that. In the training course, learning to act in accordance with new instructions is supposed to be covered by the fact that the teacher is going to give you instructions and perform the instructions for you with his hands, is going to manipulate the different parts so that as to, well, connect the movement together. And this will happen without you having a clear understanding, a clear conception of what are the rules of movements that are necessary to maintain the spine to lengthen and widen. This is very, very important. Yes, and so I have different ideas, different images that are coming from the fact that I've seen thousands of modern Alexander teachers train with the somatic training, train with the hands, and what we see here is a modern Alexander teacher, and it is absolutely clear that there is a marked difference with the first one, which is having a postgraduate training where she's learning to link up the movement of the arms and the movement of the torso. It's obvious in this occurrence, in this event, there is a need to direct the movement of the arms, yes, and to direct the movements of the part of the torso so that the torso is not interfered with. What do we mean by interfering with the mechanism of the torso? Well, we mean shortening. In this image, it's absolutely obvious that the lady that is putting hands on a student is totally lifting the front part of the chest backward and projecting the lower rib cage forward, protruding the abdomen, arching the back. That's maybe it's possible that she's doing that on purpose, but I don't think so. I propose that she does not realize that she's shortening the back so much when giving us a lesson. I think that she's, without knowing it, engaining. The engaining principle that we've seen much earlier is this idea that you can trust to your sensory appreciation, you can trust to what you feel to organize the movements of the different parts. So if she feels that she's at ease, if she feels that she's lengthening and widening, if she thinks that her head is forward and up without any regard for the movements of the different parts of the torso, this is why she can present an image like this on the internet to, in fact, well, market her way of working. So Alexander is saying here, most people have developed a more or less imperfectly coordinated use of the mechanism, which involves reliance upon the engaining principle. It is not surprising that so many pupils have the habit of projecting unconsidered and disconnected orders. Orders, that is, that have not been reasoned out from the point of view of the coordinated use of the different parts concerned, and which therefore result in a mal-coordinated movement. So the mal-coordinated movement, we only see it as a result for the moment. It's a still picture, so what we see is the position she has assumed in order to transmit a correct stimulus, supposedly a correct experience to the pupil. She's supposedly at her best advantage to transmit a correct stimulus to the pupil. Of course, I doubt this very much, yes. But let's look at what Alexander suggests here. He says that the movements, for example, of the top of the rib cage backward and the movement of the lower rib cage forward are projected by the person. And he argues that these are unconsidered orders. Of course, the order to move the rib cage is disconnected from the order to move the pelvic bone, in the sense that of course they are connected in the fact that they're happening at the same time, but they are disconnected in the sense that they result in a shortening of the torso. These are not movements that can ever lead to lengthening and widening the torso. It's all the opposite. So when he says that the person is projecting unconsidered and disconnected orders, we must assume that this teacher is not projecting these orders consciously. She's not thinking orders to move the rib cage in this way or to move the lower torso in the opposite way in order to shorten her back. Absolutely not. This is happening, and she's just subconsciously letting these movements happen all the time. That's what. So there, you have to be careful, because orders are not all conscious. There are subconscious orders. There are orders that are based on the feeling sense. So that person has been trained somatically. So she has a feeling sense of when she feels at ease. She has a feeling sense of what is, you would say, good for her. We may agree or disagree, but it's certain that Alexander does disagree. Yes? And so you can look at many, many pictures of modern Alexander teachers in activity, and they are not projecting conscious orders continuously. Apparently, when they lift their hands, there is a very marked misuse of the mechanism of the torso. We see that the shoulders are projected upwards and backward. We see that the middle torso and the rib cage is projected forward at the lower part. We see that there is an excessive tension in the legs. There is a shortening at the back. It's absolutely obvious. And yet, according to the academic thinking, the person should be in the best use in order to transmit the correct experience. It's supposed that if you're able to direct yourself with conscious orders, then you are in the capacity to transmit these orders through your hands. I doubt very much that what the gentleman transmits through his hands, or even what he feels through his hands, because what he feels through his hands is, of course, associated with what he feels within himself. Well, if he feels so little within himself of his situation in space, it's rather difficult to imagine that he can feel very, very accurately what is happening in the organism of his pupil. It sounds logical to me. Well, what Alexander is saying, that when therefore such a teacher comes for remedial work on a plane of conscious control and is asked to project a series of connected order continuously, he naturally finds great difficulty in breaking the habit he has formed of discontinuous attention and of haphazard and subconscious guidance and direction. What is discontinuous attention? I've chosen this picture because I think we can form a conception of what Alexander is talking about. I suspect that the teacher's attention is on the pupil. I suspect that his attention is certainly on his fingers or his thumbs. He's clearly intent on feeling something inside the pupil mechanism. Yes? While we call it discontinuous attention because I propose that his attention on the movement of the different part of his own torso is completely stopped. He has no attention onto the rule of organization of the movements of the part of the torso at the moment. I suspect that he has no real idea of what I'm talking about when I say the rules of connecting movements, because This is not taught, of course, in the modern Alexander technique classes. It's not taught consciously. People are taught to experience something, experience a certain use of the arm in relation with the torso, but it's quite surprising that at the end of the training course, that is, well, a long training course of 3 years, the connection, the linking up of the movement of the arm and the movement of the torso is absolutely not there. You have to have a continuous attention, but it's not attention on one thing at a time. It's attention on well, complex mosaic of different rules and movements. It's absolutely necessary to have in mind what are the rules for the movement of the elbows in relation with the movement of the upper torso, middle torso, and lower torso. And apparently here it's not happening. And I can tell you that at first, when teachers of the modern Alexander technique start to have initial Alexander technique lessons, well, at first, they find great difficulty in breaking the habit of discontinuous attention and subconscious guidance and direction. So there are ideas that we can take from the books. And so here is another one where Alexander is talking of linking up the different parts of the movements and the orders relating to these. Well, that's exactly the first sentence. It will be found that, as a rule, the pupil has no conception of linking up the different parts of the movement and the orders relating to these. I transform that sentence to say that the teacher of the modern Alexander technique has no conception of the linking up of the different parts of the movements and the orders relating to these. On this image, we see that, of course, the lady teacher is in red, the pupil is in blue, and we see that the lady teacher is moving the hands up in space, forward in space, if you want. So with it, there are movements of course, the shoulders, and it's apparently clear that she does not realize that it's possible to move the hands up and not the shoulder. So she's raising the shoulder upwards. The shoulders are parts that are directly linked up with the head, with the very strong muscles of the neck at the back. And so if you lift the shoulder every time you lift the hand, if you believe that it's natural to do so, every time you're going to lift the hand, you're going to shorten the muscle of the neck, at least on one side, as here. And so it's difficult when watching just the last image, watching this, to imagine that the teacher can have the neck free. On top, it's absolutely clear here that when the person is moving the arms forward, she's also moving the middle torso forward. It's absolutely obvious that lower sternum spot is much further forward than the superior part of the sternum, which means that the person is rotating the rib cage, but when she's rotating the rib cage in this way, we can see that she's massively shortening the back. So this is important to understand, but we have also to relate it with another theory, another explanation. The other explanation is that the linking up of the movement and the orders should be done by feeling, by the experience. So that if you repeat the experience of having the arm going forward, and you may have seen many teachers with their hands on the lower ribs of the person, with their hands asking for, like they say, a release of the rib cage back. Well, it's curious because after a 3-year training course and many years of teaching, we see that the teacher has not learned anything. The teacher has not learned to act in accordance with the instruction. The instruction is back, upper torso forward, as they were using them in the first training course. And, well, the person is lifting the hands are going forward, but the back is certainly not going back with it, all the opposite. And so the person is seen to shorten the torso. The interference with the mechanism of the torso is really massive. And again, the person is supposed to transmit a correct experience to the pupil. So we have to imagine that for that sentence to be true, then we have to separate the use of the teacher from teaching. But I don't think this is possible. When you teach with hands, well, you have to be at your utmost direction, conscious direction of your use. So, Alexander is talking about carrying out orders and carrying on an order. That is, you have an order for the back to go back, and you must continue to carry on this order while you're creating a new movement, for example, of the elbow and hand going forward. That must be associated, of course, with the direction of the shoulder. And so Alexander, what is saying that there are requirements. There are requirements. I often talk about rules. Alexander often says requirement. The requirement of the secondary part of the movement. So the movement is to reach up with the hands. And this movement, which I would call a gesture, requires different orders. And these orders have to be connected. So it is quite interesting to deal with this kind of ideas. And so we have here a student having a lesson with me. And so at first I will, well, of course, in order to obtain the control, the pupil must know what is incorrect. And what is incorrect is not a, random act. I am here asking the person to bring a ruler under the armpit, and when the person is having to manipulate the long stick with the hand, the direction of attention is going to be focused on the arm and the ruler. And so the person is going to act in accordance with my instructions, but then I will show her that when she's done that, she has also given certain orders of movements to the different parts of the mechanism of the torso, and the result is, well, something that was not suspected. That is the unknown for that person. The person did not know that if she was giving no attention, no conscious attentions to the rules of movements of the different parts of the torso, the person didn't know she was going to react like this. It's like a surprise. When she looks at the video, so I stop the video and I say to her, look at what has happened. You have complied with my orders to rotate the wrist in a very strange way and to bring the ruler under the opposite armpit, a very complex organization of movement. Of course, your attention, that has a tendency to be discontinuous, has been focused on one part, which is focused on the mechanism of the arm, and as a result of this, there has been movement. There has been movements of the different parts of the torso, but these movements have not been directed deliberately. Your habits are to be seen. It's what happens when you do not consciously control and direct the movements of the different parts of the torso. It's not pleasant to see this. Yeah, and so Alexander explains in another case that his next effort, so my first effort is to show the habit. See what happens. So we are looking at something as evidence of a habit, and we can repeat different performance, different procedures, where the attention is going to be focused somewhere, and we will see what happens, how the different movements of the part of the torso are organized. You must remind yourself that all the pictures I'm taking are from Alexander Technique teachers for the moment. These are not pupils, yes? So I'm here demonstrating that guidance by feeling, guidance by the somatic direction of experience, does not solve Alexander's problem at all. The problem is still there. So, as it is still there, no problem. It's not a condemnation. It's just saying, well, now we must think at a way to get out of this groove, out of this discontinuous attention. And so it's going to be necessary now to, follow a procedure. So Alexander says, my next effort must be to give the pupil a correct and conscious guidance and control of all the parts concerned, and in order to obtain this control, he must have a complete and accurate apprehension of all the movements concerned. Once again, we are faced with the same problem, is that how do you get a complete and accurate apprehension of all the movement concerned? And the modern Alexander technique teachers are going to come again to the fore, saying, yes, I am giving my pupil a complete and accurate apprehension of all the movement concerned by having them move under my guidance. And again, I will refuse that statement. I will say that if it was true that teaching with touch, guiding the pupil into the correct adjustment worked, well, then we would not see images as the one I'm presenting. Something has gone wrong. Something is not working. These teachers have had 3 years training course in the best schools in Europe and the States and Australia, and still it's very surprising that with such elementary gesture, we are not talking about a golf swing here. We are talking about raising a ruler under your armpit. It's the speed and the accuracy are completely different. We are talking very slow movements, and yet in this very slow movement, using the arms is associated with using the mechanism of the torso in a very, very strange way. For an Alexander teacher that knows about the, these orders that we call neck free, head forward, and up back to lengthen and widen. The back is not lengthening and widening, the shoulders are so high that the neck is absolutely not free, and the head is completely retracted. Look at where the front of the torso is, look at where the chin is. It's obvious that the person is retracting the head. So, how do you transmit a complete and accurate apprehension of all the movements concerned? Well, my first idea was to go and look at Alexander's books. We have Alexander showing here. It's a picture from, of course, the second edition of Man Supreme Inheritance, and we see that Alexander exactly shows what he means. Yes, and what he means, if you observe it, if you start to read, you will see that he's talking about rules of behavior. I am very fond of rules of behavior. For example, we have here a geometric rule of behavior, yes, enunciated by F.M. Alexander. With the arms hanging vertically, the relative position of the parts of the thorax where the lungs are situated will be seen to be in front of the arms instead of being, as it should be, behind them. So I observed the image Alexander was presenting. He's asking you to make a mental rotation, because in this image you can absolutely see that the arms are not hanging vertically. They are lifted very high in the air. So I made the effort of rotating the arms, so that I said, well, if the arms are rotating so that they are seen to be vertical, where is the front of the arm in this picture? And it's absolutely obvious that in this picture, the whole rib cage is in front of the arm. So I started to look at other images, and I said, well, when these teachers are putting hands, are lifting their hands, okay, where is the front of the arm? Where is the front of the rib cage? And I started to become capable of thinking, okay, the arms are here, the rib cage is there, okay, these are all demonstration of breaking the rule. which is these people are shortening the back. These people are not using the mechanism of the torso as they should, or they are Alexander an expression that is interfering with the mechanism of the torso. And so rules can be very helpful, but you must understand something about rules. They deal about the future. Here we see results, we see the ends. You see the person is already in the position. No, we are going to be interested in how to make the movements in order to fulfill the rules, so that the rules has to be prior to the procedure. The person must understand what I'm requesting. I am requesting to, for example, lift the hands and directing the movement of the lowest ribs on the side of the torso backward. The person starts to know what it is we want to see, what it is we don't want to see, so that in the lessons the pupil is not taken unaware. You know what is, I had so many experiences, it should be right by now. We don't care. No. It's not that it should be right. That if you do not think about the rule, if you do not connect the movements of the arms with the movements of the parts of the torso, and here with the middle part of the torso, you will end up looking like this without feeling anything. You will not know how it has happened. And you may resent the fact that it's pointed out to you, but it's exactly what your habit is in fact producing for you. So it's necessary to start working with speech-based rules that will help to consciously control on a video recording what it is you're performing, whether you're going in the right direction or not. And so the right direction is to stop before acting, and having in mind the different rules that apply to, well, the lengthening of the mechanism of the torso. So here we see another teacher, and she is starting to observe what are subconscious habits of movements of the different parts of the torso, and she's starting to create an understanding of how movement can happen. For example, here she's using her own hands, and she's got a thumb on the middle of the spine, the middle of the lumbar spine, to be correct, lumbar 3, the third lumbar thoracic process, and she's having the index finger on the lower sternum. And she's discovering that she has a habit of most of the time organizing the movements together. Either she has this spot, lumbar 3, directed, a movement of this spot directed forward, and the movement of the lower sternum directed forward, or they are both back. In both cases, when both the movements of the lumbar middle point and the lower sternum are moving forward, the person is arching the back, yes, overextending, therefore shortening the back, or when they are both going back at the same time, the person is just slouching, creating the curve in the opposite direction. So the rule we are after, lengthening the lumbar region, is not anything extreme. It's just the middle ground between arching forward and arching backward. We consider that arching in geometry creates a shortening. It's always longer. Alexander used an expression. He says, take a piece of paper and set it flat against the wall. You will find that it's longer than when you pull the extremity toward each other, when you curve the paper. It's exactly applicable for human beings. If you want to lengthen, you can set your back against the wall, and you will see that you have to organize, well, the wall is going to make sure that lumbar 3 is not going back when the lower sternum is going back. So we have the means whereby principle and the doctrine of antagonistic action in the same procedure. And so I explain these things. Yeah. So Alexander is saying great care must be taken to see that the pupils has not interfered with the mechanism of the torso in the effort to take the weight of the arm. We must have great care. But the person that must have great care here is not the teachers of teacher. It's the teacher himself. When the teacher is taking the weight of the arm, as it is here, the interference with the mechanism of the torso is massive, massive. Yeah? And so Alexander has pointed to the fact that what we don't want, okay, we are not acting in accordance with the rules when we are moving the hands. It's pretty simple. No, it's not. It's not that simple, because you must understand also that every time you're going to move your hands, your attention is going to be directed somewhere, and it's going to be directed on the feelings, first of all, of your hands touching something, but on your own feelings. And your own feelings are absolutely untrustworthy. Even after a 3 years training course, you will find that you cannot trust what you feel. And so, the interference can take place in various ways, but it always implies that the pupil has forgotten his orders and has harked back to one or other of his subconscious habits. Again, here we have a difficulty, because it depends of what meaning you give to his orders. Yes, what are his orders? And if his orders are to think of the neck being free, it's obvious that there is nothing to help how to organize the movements of the parts of the torso. It is clear that we are discussing new orders here, and not orders of prevention, like neck free, head forward and up, back to lengthen and widen, that should never be acted upon. What is essential here is a coordinated use of the arms, and the only way by which he can secure this is first by giving the necessary preventing orders, neck free, head forward and up, back to lengthen and widen, and then by rehearsing the series of new orders given by the teacher. And this point is very important, because Alexander will give a general definition of the series of new orders. He says in the series of new orders, the movement of the arms is linked with the use of the other parts of the body. The movement of the arm is linked up with the direction of the movement of the other parts of the body. This is how I translate this sentence for myself, that it is then possible for the pupil to start to, for example, in sitting, link up the movement of the arm with the movement of the other parts of the body, meaning that, of course, the upper part of the arm, in our rule, should be forward of the thoracic cage. In this image, this is what the student is performing. Is seen to perform in sitting. She's got her attention on the movement of the upper part of the arm, linked up with the movement of the parts of the torso, in order for the arms to be hanging vertically in front of the rib cage. And in order to obtain that, the brain of both the pupil and the teacher are at work the whole time. No use is made of hypnotism, of auto-suggestion, but the confident, skillful, patient, and explicit directions of the teacher should tend to remove the flurry and vagueness and consequent waste of mental and physical effort by the pupil. Yes, when we read Alexander, very often we do not read the words. Alexander is talking about explicit direction. Explicit is a word that is quite interesting. It's at its root in the classical Latin. It's a past participle of explicare. to explain, explicare. But you must understand the flavor of that explicare, the flavor of what it is to explain. Is it to explain a movement to have a person experience that movement? Certainly not. There is something missing, because explicare suppose that the direction of the movements of the parts are enunciated, spoken out, and explained with the help of logic, with the help of reasoning, with the help, for example, of geometric diagrams. When Alexander explained lengthening the back, he's in fact drawing a diagram. He's talking about a wall, a vertical structure, and he's talking about a paper that is set against the wall. So it's quite interesting to follow the words, and when Alexander is talking about explicit direction, to understand that these directions must be explained, must be understood, must be represented by the pupil. If they are just memory of some feeling experience when the teacher was doing it for you, say, wow, it was so great, I didn't understand anything. I was so transported into the feeling realm that I cannot explain anything. This is not an example of what we mean by explicit directions. And the flurry and the vagueness are for me totally associated with somatic experiences. When you have somatic experiences, you never get an impression of the whole. And there is a very interesting comment by one student of Alexander, Miss Lee, the wife of Mr. Lee that wrote the invisible exercise. She's called Janet Lee, and in her style she's very, very interesting to read. She wrote this magic body. With her husband, they both had 2 years of lesson in the 1990s, before Alexander really started to transmit experiences with his hands. And she said, most faults are difficult to perceive in oneself, not only for the psychological reason that we may not like to face them, but for the physical reason that they are usually faults of relation between parts of the body. And it is not easy to get the whole body into perspective so that the maladjustment of structure is evident to the eye. Even a large mirror is not adequate. But fortunately, there is usually a helpful friend at hand ready to point out faults if one really wants to know them. All this is quite interesting. The faults that we want the pupil to perceive are not in herself. The faults are in the association of movement that she is habitually performing when under the control of the feeling sense, when trusting to the feeling sense. Yeah, and there is another point where I would disagree with Jeanette, is that she's talking about fault of relations between parts. Well, she's talking about the result. Alexander is not. Alexander is talking about the cause. And the cause are not what she's writing. The cause are faults of relation between the movements of the parts of the body. It's the proportion of movements of the parts of the body that is incorrect and leads to the incorrect placement of the parts. So, but this is a very good representation that when you have an experience where somebody is manipulating you out of your habitual way, well then you have no perspective on the maladjustment of the structure. Well, it's only if the lesson was filmed, if you could see what the teacher is trying to perform, that you could have some sort of idea of what are the rules. But I bet that it would be very, very difficult to enunciate. It's much better to have a teacher that clearly gives you what are the rules. If you want to see the arm hanging vertically in front of the front of the rib cage, well, it's much better to have Alexander telling you. And so we have a different understanding after each procedures onto what are the rules that we want to follow. And the next question is how to direct the movements in such a way as to perform the adjustment that the person wants to obtain that is different from her habit. And I'm sorry, but this session must unfortunately stop. The electric company wants to make some repairs, and they are saying that they are going to cut the energy. I am so sorry.
Okay, it's no problem. we did that's 50 minutes, over 50 minutes anyway. For the people watching the video, you'll find a link to Jeando's website underneath, so you can book a lesson with him. And we'll see you in the next video. Thanks, Jeando.